Have you ever wondered why banks, government buildings, and even churches all look the same? Why do they resemble the grand temples of ancient Greece and Rome? As an architect, I've studied these structures extensively. But more than that, I study the Word of God. And today I'm going to show you how architecture reveals a deeper spiritual reality, one that most people completely miss. Architecture has always been about order. We, as architects, designed the world to reflect the cosmic order, at least that was the original idea. The Greeks classified architecture into orders: the simple Doric, the elegant Ionic, and the highly decorative Corinthian. And here's where it gets interesting. Corinthian became the dominant order for religious and financial power. Why? Because it was the most extravagant, the most authoritative, the most majestic. Look at the Vatican, look at Washington, D.C., look at your local bank. The Corinthian order, the final expression of classical architecture, is the one that now dominates our modern world. But let's go deeper. Corinthian was not the first. It was an evolution, a departure from something purer. The Ionic order, before it was covered in leaves, had a scroll, a sign of wisdom. This change is not just architectural, it is spiritual. A transformation took place. The question is, who orchestrated it? Did you know that church architecture, the very structure of the house of God, was shaped by the Freemasons and the Templars? Yes, the very same organizations shrouded in mystery, secrecy, and hidden knowledge. The same ones accused of merging Christianity with esoteric traditions. They designed the great Gothic cathedrals, Notre Dame, Chartres, and Canterbury, with pointed arches, ribbed vaults, and towering spires, all based on sacred geometry. But ask yourself, did Jesus Christ tell us to build temples like this? Acts chapter 7 verse 48 says, "However, the Most High does not dwell in temples made by human hands." Yet what do we see today? Grand buildings, massive institutions, wealth, power, and authority, all tied to religion. The very thing Jesus came to free us from. When the veil of the temple was torn, God was showing us something. His presence was no longer confined to a structure, but mankind, just like in Babel, insisted on building up towers of power. It didn't take long for Christianity to be absorbed into the Roman system. And Rome? Rome had temples, Rome had economy, Rome had trade. So what did institutionalized Christianity become? A global system that mixed worship with politics, trade, and economy? Exactly what Artemis and Diana represented in ancient Ephesus. Now let's talk about Ephesus. A city famous for one thing, the Temple of Artemis, also known as Diana. She was the goddess of fertility, trade, and power. And what did John say to the church of Ephesus? In Revelation chapter 2 verse 4, "You have left your first love." This is deep. The protos agape, the first love, who is that? That is Christ, the one who first loved us. And yet, just like in architecture, the church evolved away from its purest form and took on a new identity. Instead of the scroll of wisdom, we got acanthus leaves. Instead of Christ, we got institutions. Instead of faith, we got economy. And who benefited? The same powers that ruled in Ephesus. The same powers that rule today. This is why we must return to the protos agape. We must strip away the Corinthian excess, the institutionalized systems, the merging of faith with worldliness. Because in the end, the book of Revelation tells us, there will be no temple. Why? Because God Himself will dwell with us. The temple was never the goal. The temple was only a shadow. And we must not be deceived into thinking that building bigger, grander, and wealthier structures brings us closer to God. It does not. My brothers and sisters, this is a call to return, to step away from the system that binds faith to trade, to reject the institutions that turn worship into economy, to forsake the Corinthian extravagance and return to the simplicity of Christ. Because if we do not, if we allow Diana, Artemis, and the spirit of Ephesus to take hold, then we will be no different from those who left their first love. And in the end, only those who endure, who remain faithful to the protos agape, will see the true temple, the one not made by human hands but by God Himself. He who has an ear, let him hear. The time is short. Do not leave your first love.
Understanding the system doesn't necessarily mean pulling all your money out of the banks. Think about what Jesus said, "Render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." Mark 12:17. He didn't say to avoid money entirely, but He did warn us not to be enslaved by it. The real question is, are you controlled by the system, or are you using the system wisely for God's glory? If your money is in the bank, it's just a tool, it's not a god. If you need to use banking for your livelihood, that's fine, as long as it doesn't rule over your life. The real danger is when people put their trust and hope in the system rather than in God. True preparation isn't just about physically withdrawing from the financial system, but about spiritual readiness, not conforming to the world's ways. As 1 Timothy 6:10 says, "For the love of money is the root of all evil." The problem isn't money itself but the love of money, which leads people away from God. So the real question is, how are you using money? Is it a tool for good, or has it become an idol?